Hello everyone, today we're going to be talking about the Tube Quad. So the first video I made about this quad was back in June 2017, is now January 2018. So I'm just going to go ahead and review the design features of this quad and what I wanted it to be, just because that video is kind of old now. What I wanted this quad to be was a 6-inch acro quad, because that's what I like to fly. And the main design features are that it's a true X, stretched in both dimensions, so that means there's a gap between all the props. It has a sideways battery and a really tight CG like this. The fuselage is only 100 millimeters long. That's pretty much it. It's very simple. So let's go ahead and look at the specifics of this quad. Okay, so I'm going to start from the outside and work my way in, and I'm going to talk about both the electronics and the frame and the design itself. And I'm also going to be talking about the new electronics versus the old electronics, especially in terms of weight, because that was my goal with this rebuild. Originally the frame was pretty light, but my electronics are really heavy, so that drove me to really strengthen the frame a lot to be able to handle those heavier electronics and the greater energy you have to dissipate in a crash. So really at this point I'm wondering, now that I have the lighter electronics, if I can thin the arms out and things like that to start taking weight back off the frame. But anyways, starting with the props, it's the Racekraft 6-inch tri-blades. The motors are BrotherHobby Returner R3 2206 2140 kV motors, and they provide plenty of power. Just because this quad's so light. I was running the F60 Pros before that, and those were some monster motors, but they are a lot heavier at 35 grams. These BrotherHobby motors are around 28 grams, so that saves me about an ounce overall just by changing the motors. So that was my biggest thing I wanted to change on this. If we look at the design of the tube, it is a 8mm inner diameter, 12mm outer diameter tube, and you can see that the wires run through the tube, which gives this quad really good aerodynamics and a really clean look. I also notched out the ends of the tubes here so that the wires could slip in and be protected in the event of a crash. The motor mounts are just a 1.5mm carbon plate epoxied on, and then 2 bolts up through the tube to attach the motor. I occasionally would break these off. I'm not sure if I'll keep doing it now that this quad is significantly lighter, but initially I tried having short screws go through the sides here so I wouldn't have that screw length to save some weight, and that's not enough to hold them on. So the screws actually do help take up some of the force of impacts, but with this setup it's actually surprisingly strong. Moving towards the middle, talking about the arms still, they're held on 2 screws each, 8 screws total. Yes, the screws do go into the FC stack. Some people hate this. I don't really care because I don't break arms. You can see that there's a gap through the middle. The wires can come out through the front and back or through the sides, so that's that gap there. And how I did that was, of course with a tube just cut, it's just a rectangle, but then I just took those 2 corners and sanded them down, so I would have like a half of a hexagon shape going on, and that allows plenty of space for those wires to pass through, which then attach to the 4-in-1 ESC. And this is the Hobbywing XRotor 40 amp 4-in-1 BLHeli-S ESC with the Hobbywing XRotor F4 flight controller. Currently on the flight controller I'm running 8K dynamic filter. That might change in the future, of course. Moving to the back, we have the LemonRX diversity satellite. We have the TBS Unify Pro 5V with a Lumenier dum-dum, which is the U.F.L version, which saved a ton of weight over the TBS Triumph and U.F.L to SMA adapter that I was running before. Not to mention the 4-in-1 ESC also saved a lot of weight. In the front, we have the Runcam Swift 2.1 lens, which is the wider of the two, and that saved a lot of weight from a full-size camera with the metal bracket that used to hold it in. And I'm just using these TPU 3D printed mounts that are used on the Flow Ride by Kebab FPV, which are working pretty well so far. I'm not a huge fan of only having 2 screws with your camera and then it can tilt easily, but the TPU actually grips the camera pretty well and the camera's pretty light, so it's not much of an issue so far. I think that's all the electronics. We have a 3mm bottom plate. The fuselage is 100mm long. I want to extend the nose about 10mm to just get the HD camera a little further forward, because you can see with my foam wedge here, I've actually made it so the camera is further forward just to get the motors out of view. So all you see is some props and it's not that distracting, but when the motors are in view, it kind of annoys me. Got some bling bling 35mm standoffs, and the cool thing about these 35mm standoffs is that because of the tube arms and their thickness, it actually gives you a slammed frame, but you still have plenty of space for your camera. If you want to run a full-size camera, plenty of space in the back. You can still run a 2-board high stack. It makes the CG from top to bottom really good, so it's right in line with the prop lines, and the top plate is also in line with the prop lines. So if I hold it by the props, it's straight up and down perfect, or if I hold it by the top plate, it is straight up and down perfect. Now that we've covered all the electronics and the design of this quad, let's talk about the weight. So the all-up weight for this thing with these electronics is 591 grams. The dry weight is 337 grams. So I think those are really good weights. It weighs less than 600 grams and is a 6-inch, and that's while it's carrying a GoPro, so I think that's really impressive. The same exact frame with the heavier electronics was 70 grams heavier, so I saved 70 grams just by swapping the motors and electronics out for lighter components, which is kind of ridiculous. The frame itself, which I'm including the battery straps, GoPro mount, and battery pad, is 134 grams, which is okay. It's not as light as it was initially, which was around 80 grams, which was crazy light, but then I had to make a bunch of changes to improve the durability. A thing to note is that I'm using steel hardware here, and I mention that because there is a lot of weight in hardware because the screws have to be so long to go through the tube arms, so that adds a noticeable amount of weight. So the hardware itself weighs 23 grams, and I did the calculations, and if I switched to titanium hardware, that would drop it to 13 grams, so that's a saving of 10 grams, which is very significant. And if I switch to aluminum, it'd be even more, but I don't think aluminum is strong enough. So compared to some other frames, remember 134 grams for the frame, including all the hardware and battery straps. So the 5-inch Alien is known for being heavy. It's 144 grams, and that's with aluminum hardware. The Reverb, which is the new one by Impulse RC, 122 grams with steel hardware. Our Man Chameleon, the 5-inch, is 128 grams with, I have no idea what the hardware is. The X-Hover Stingy is 110 grams with titanium hardware, which is very good. The Hyperlight Flow Ride, 5-inch is 90 grams, the 6-inch is 94 grams. That's with steel hardware. That is very good. I'm not sure how durable it is. It is a very well designed quad. I like that. I like the Flow Ride and the Stingy a lot based off their designs. So there are some weight comparisons. This is really light. I really don't think it needs to be any lighter, especially because it is a 6-inch prop. If you watch Kebab's videos, he would say that the ideal weight for a 6-inch is 650 and below. So that's why I like 6-inch a lot, is it gives you all that grip so that your disc loading isn't super high. So enough of me talking about the design and the electronics of this quad. Let's go ahead and see how this actually flies.
Well, I know that you're young, and I know you're naive, but you know that you got sugar under your sleeve. But the way that you did it, and you're doing me still, I can't help but to wonder, is your love for me real? Now you
Okay, I hope you guys could tell from the footage that this thing flies fantastic. The lighter components definitely made a big difference with how snappy it feels in the air. The lighter motors do just fine, even though they're not as beefy, and I think it actually helps because there's less weight at the ends of the arms, so it's really snappy in flips and fast maneuvers, and it's still, you know, nice and smooth in those slow maneuvers, just like 6-inch always is. So I'm really happy with how this thing came out. It's just really mind-blowing how responsive I've gotten a 6-inch quad to be, with help from these really responsive props and from Betaflight. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think about this design, any comments or even improvements that you think could be made. Make sure to share this with your friends because this is a one-off design. If you like this video, please like it. If you want to see more content like this, please get subscribed, and thanks for watching.